so that it's ready for delivery on the day of extraction. So Medit Design is one of these apps that is very powerful.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. My name is Jenny and I'm a part of education team at Medit. Nice to meet you everyone. Today we have Dr. Nejad after so long. How have you been, doctor?
I'm great. How are you doing, Jenny? It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while.
Busy couple months, but I'm excited to share some of the cool things I've been doing. So I'm really excited for this webinar.
Everybody will be so excited to see your webinar. It has been a while.
Yep.
So for some of you who have forgotten who is Dr. Nejad, I would like to briefly introduce about him. So he's graduated from UCLA in California and now runs a dental clinic in Beverly Hills. Was it too short?
No, it's okay. But I graduated from USC. I went to UCLA for undergrad, but dental school is USC.
I see. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about today's topic. It's about 3D printed interim solutions for missing teeth. So I was just wondering, is interim restoration exactly the same one, just as the provisional restoration or something different?
So that's a good question. Interim restorations and solutions are a term that can be used very interchangeably, but basically the way I think about it is it's an intermediate solution, oftentimes a transitional appliance. Like I personally call provisionals for like things that are going to be shorter duration and interims for things that are going to be longer than a provisional or temporary,
Okay.
but less than a permanent. So in today's webinar, I'm going to be talking about how some of these tools that Medit has in 3D printing combine to give great solutions for the implant process, including removable and fixed options for transitioning from your teeth to having an implant, the whole process.
That seems really interesting.
Great.
So before we begin, I have an announcement. Hi.
Hi.
Okay, so Medit has released Medit Link beta version. So we have an event with a MacBook Pro 13 with Medit Link. So still there are weeks left to join the event. So Dr. Matt Nejad, do you know how to win the MacBook?
Yes, I'm going to win because I've been using Medit Link beta for a few weeks. So hopefully I'm going to win. But yes, I know you join, you use, and by the way, like honestly, it's amazing. Huge improvements. I'm really happy. I know some of the things that I had wished for have made it into Medit Link and even Medit Scan for Clinic. So it's very exciting.
To win this MacBook, you have to write down everything that you just gave us to our email, beta@medit.com.
Great.
Okay. Okay.
Cool.
It seems a lot, but I'll summarize up and tell you some features. So first of all, in the Medit Link, now you can sort all the data according to patient's list. It would be really comfortable to categorize data accordingly. And second, for MeditScan for clinics. So first new feature, you can acquire high resolution data by detecting prepared tooth automatically with help of Medit's AI technology, and you will experience improved scanning. Like you can resume scanning quicker than in previous version after pausing. And with the AI technology, you can now align the scan data regardless of the tooth numbers, etc. So there are so many improvements that you will find it so convenient to use Metascanner. And last one is Metascan for Labs. Now the program will automatically perform additional scans after calculating the optimal scanning angles. And half-arch alignment is also available. Okay, that was long. You already tried this version, right?
Yes, I used it today.
Okay, so please participate the event.
Absolutely. I will.
Okay, so I would like to remind you all that right after the lecture is done, we are going to have Q&A session. So we've already collected all the questions through the email in advance. So we will cover those questions today. And while watching the webinars, you can simply go to the chat box and write down. And if you would like to watch the previous webinar, you can visit our YouTube channel and Medit Academy. Okay, that's all about it. Shall we begin, Doctor?
Great. Okay, great. So my lecture or webinar is 3D printed interim restorations for missing teeth. We're going to look at an application of how you can use removable and fixed prosthetic options for the implant treatment process. And I think that's so important because I always found transitioning from teeth to implants to be kind of stressful in how you would treatment plan things. I'm not the biggest fan of doing immediate implants in a lot of situations. And what happens is it gets frustrating and difficult to treatment plan accurately and keep your costs under control and not overwhelm patients. And with the ability to do a lot of these things myself, it's not only made it easier and better, but more exciting. Patients are happier and the whole process is better. So I'm going to be sharing that with you. Just a little bit about myself. I practice full time. I teach courses through the Nejad Institute focused on biomimetic dentistry, and I manage a group practice focused on biomimetic and aesthetic dentistry. I'm doing a lot of big cases, but also smaller cases involving one fillings all the way up through inlays, onlays, quadrants, and full mouth cases. I started 3D printing in 2015, and at that time, it was really exciting. I had just started intraoral scanning as well, but the applications were really limited. I was basically doing 3D models and maybe a design here and there that a lab would send me or a DSD lab would send me, but I didn't have much application. And fast forward to today, and all of a sudden, we have so many different options, including 3D printing models, occlusal guards, appliances, all sorts of different appliances, provisionals and interim restorations, and now even final restorations. So 3D printing and intraoral scanning have really come together to provide so many different applications. And for me, one of those key technologies that brought this all together was when I started using Medit, because I am really a big fan of using different technologies and learning a lot of different things, but the software limitations, the licenses, and so on make it hard for you to invest in something when you're not confident if you're going to implement it. And with Medit, all the different apps which are constantly improving everything from Medit Design to the model builder, the temporary app, and now the clinic beta app and the splints app give me so much utility that not just myself, but my whole office has become more digitally savvy. We're doing way more things. We even have a position where one of my employees is primarily focused on digital design and doing things with 3D printing. And that's really all thanks to Medit apps because it connected that technology. 3D printing was something cool in concept, but the technology now is here where we're able to do things, produce utility, and Medit has empowered us to do those things. And that's why I love Medit and I'm such a big fan, because they are unleashing the possibilities for dentistry to improve, for things to get easier and better for all of us and for patients to benefit from that. So that's really huge. So we're going to be focusing on two of the more powerful Medit apps, in my opinion. One of them, Medit Design, and the other one is going to be the Medit Clinic CAD Beta, which is able to do a lot of cool things. I'm going to be showing you that for one patient. So this is our patient. This is a recent case, and I'm excited to share this with you. So this patient came to my clinic for well aware of the resorption on number 9, but also realizing that in treating this tooth, she also wanted to improve her smile. So there's a big treatment here. We reviewed plans, we did our designs, and basically determined that to get the goal to improve her smile, we'd be doing 10 restorations, one of them being an implant and the rest being partial coverage, ceramic restorations or veneers. And so it all starts with this pivotal moment where she needs to have number 9 addressed. And she has one major limitation, which is she understands that removable options might be necessary when she is going to have number 9 extracted. but she also is a musician and doesn't want to go without a fixed solution for a long period throughout the transitional period. So we're going to keep that in mind in our planning. And let's go ahead and take a closer look. So we have this resorption, and of course, the tooth is unrestorable. We have this evaluated with CBCT, referred to perio, and just pretty obviously understandable that restoring this tooth is not an option. So, after consultation with both the periodontist and myself, we are preparing for what's the first thing she's going to get. And generally, the most predictable and smoothest is for me to deliver a Essex with a composite tooth in there. And more recently, skipping the composite tooth, but doing a 3D printed Pontic has been something I've really enjoyed. And oftentimes I can convert that into a Maryland bridge. And now making Maryland bridges is even easier than ever. So it all starts with performing a digital extraction on the primary scan or the initial scan when the patient came for consultation or record collection. So we're going to go through that step by step. So we're going to basically take our intraoral scan and we're going to create a digital extraction and a Pontic and prepare this Pontic. I don't know if you notice here, but we're going to put a retentive groove right into the Pontic design. And we're going to prepare the Essex tray and give it to the periodontist so that it's ready for delivery on the day of extraction. So Medit Design is one of these apps that is very powerful, but I think it's a little overwhelming for some people when you're first getting started, but you just have to give it a few minutes and give it a try. One of the nice things about Medit, which I really love, is you're not limited to using this software in the office. If you have a laptop, you can play with things at home. You can access these scans from anywhere. So it really produces a really prime environment for you to experiment and play with things in a comfortable environment and not feel like you're stuck at the office or wasting valuable clinic time. So when you're wanting to learn these things, I suggest you try to do it on your laptop at home, whether it's a Mac or a PC. You have all these different ways that you can get well experienced with this. So first step is going to be you take your scan of the patient and we're going to open Medit Design. Okay, so we basically push the Medit Design logo. I'm just going to load the maxilla and the mandible. It's tempting to just load the maxilla, but it's nice to see the occlusion just in case, because we're going to be wanting to evaluate that and sometimes get a modified Pontic design if occlusion is limited. So that's the easy part. We've opened up Medit Design. Now, the first step I want to do is I want to preserve the maxilla and mandible layers. So anything I'm going to edit, you'll notice throughout these demonstrations, I'm going to be duplicating things. So very easily, you right click on the layer and you duplicate, and now you have your duplicated maxilla base. And that's what I'm going to be using from the next steps. That way I always have the reference of the original maxilla and I can go back to it. And in general, if you mess up something, you can delete one of these layers and go back to your original again. So it's always nice, when in doubt, make a duplicate. And you'll see throughout these demonstrations that you can also rename any of these layers. And I do that from time to time so that I don't get confused with the naming. Okay, so now we want to select tooth number 9. Our whole workflow here is to create a digital extraction model and a Pontic. So I need to clone number 9 that I'm going to use for my Pontic. So what we're going to do is head over here to the edit mode. And then from there at the bottom, there's this icon that is for duplication right here. We want to click on that. Then you want to select. I like the smart single tooth selection. It makes it really easy. And then from there, I like to, if it doesn't select the whole tooth, you can just press this expand selected area option to expand it, or you could use the brush tools and kind of get the area. And then you just press apply. And what's happened now is we have another layer. I'm going to go ahead and rename this to number 9 clone or number 9 duplicate, whatever you want. And so if we get rid of the maxilla base that we duplicated, you can see we have our cloned tooth number 9. Moving on to the fourth step. So we have that clone number 9, but our maxilla base still has the tooth present. So I'm going to take that maxilla base and I want to digitally extract tooth number 9. Okay, so we're going to come in here. We're still in the edit mode. This time I'm not duplicating. I'm selecting this area. I'm expanding it again. You can use the brushes to be very precise in your selection. So here I'm going to take a little bit of that like tissue that has kind of gone into the cervical area from the resorption process. And so this is an estimate, but I'm going to press delete here and remove that tooth. One of the cool things is, so now this is the first step here. Now, as we do this process, keep in mind in the future, this is probably going to be one of the features built into Medit Clinic CAD to do a digital extraction, but it's good to know how to do this the basic way. So we have our extracted area, but we need to close that hole. This is especially important because I want to make an Essex tray with this. So when I make my Pontic, I need to have some sort of model to position the tooth. So I want to be able to make sure things fit, and I need to have the digital extracted model for 3D printing. So now we need to close this hole. And what we're basically going to do is close this using, again, still in edit mode, something called the bridge tool. So I'm doing some bridges here, basically kind of connecting one part to another. And that because the hole is too big to just close on its own. Now I'm going to try to fill the hole. Okay, filled the hole. Sometimes you have a little bit of an error or a problem. So what you can do is just delete that area, select, delete. Now you can go back and bridge again and close that. And sometimes after that, you still have a little area. So you can go do it again and close it. So eventually you'll be able to get a nice extracted area, and I can toggle the number 9 clone in there. You'll also notice I duplicated my number 9 clone up in the layers panel, but I like to have extra whenever possible in case I mess up. So now I'm smoothing the ridge. So I'm using the sculpting tools and the remove and the smooth tools to kind of shape this, periodically turning on my number 9 clone. There's other ways you can do this by cutting the intersection as well, but I find it's just smoother, and it doesn't have to be that precise because this is going to go into an Essex tray. I prefer to err on the side of the Pontic being a little bit smaller. So if there's no contact, that's not a big issue because it's going to be within an Essex tray and it won't be obvious. And that means it's going to be more passive when you're inserting it in. And then we want to adjust the Pontic. So I have my ridge now. And if I have my Pontic on, you can look through the internal surface and you can see that it's protruding through. So again, I'm using the edit mode, but one very important thing that kind of went fast is I locked the maxilla layer. So I right clicked on that layer on the left and I pressed lock so that I wouldn't be editing my maxilla model. I'm only editing this Pontic. So you see that little lock symbol. And now I can use the add, the remove, the smooth to create this. And again, I can turn that maxilla base back on to look, but I'm hoping or looking for no intersection. Okay. And again, remember that is a estimate of the position, and you can always either decide to leave some space, which is also fine. But I usually coordinate this with my periodontists and ask them, is it okay if you make the adjustment chair side, or how do you want to do this? And we go with that, and just good communication is key. So right now I'm doing it based on my estimation, which was conservative, and we go from there. So now we have our Pontic and we have a model that we can 3D print. The only thing that is left, which I like, is to add a retentive groove or a retention groove. You can cut this in yourself, but it's actually super easy and very convenient to digitally design this. So what I do is go again to edit mode. And then I'm going to use the selection here with the points, and I'm going to come right across. But with this tool, it goes all the way through. Okay. I like it because I can make a straight line, but now I'm removing using the brush. So I put the removal on, and I'm using the brush to kind of take away the parts I don't want. And I'm going to press OK, and we just duplicated that area. Okay. So I duplicated that area, and now I want to offset that area. I want to go ahead and lift this away, give or take between 0.2 to 0.5 millimeters, so that it See that blue area? I offset it from the tooth so it sticks out a little bit. And then if you take a look at this, you have this area, and now what you want to do is also thicken that. So you offset it, and now I'm going to thicken it. This thickness is going to define how much it cuts into the tooth. You'll see in a sec. So I just made it, what, 1 millimeter thicker. And if you look at this on top of your Pontic, you can see that you've offset it and you've thickened it. So what I'm going to do is use the Boolean cut and take B away from A. So I'm going to take that area and cut it away. And you'll see that what we have now is the resulting remaining Pontic with a retentive groove cut right in. So I have to do very little finishing. I can make my Essex. You can also bond it into your Essex tray, but I don't find that's usually necessary with this groove. And I just let the patient know about this. Good time to rename things because you have all these layers. And when you want to go to 3D print these, you want to be able to have some clear communication with your staff, or in your case, just to be not disoriented when you're looking at all these layers. So I named it number 9 final Pontic with retention groove. 3D printing this is pretty straightforward. So we're going to, so here we're looking at our file viewer view of this scan. And you can see under the design tab over here on the left, we have all those different layers. And this one was named different because I had done this previously, but you're gonna basically pick whichever one you want. So this one's final number 9 Pontic. I wanna export it as an STL file. So I just select that one. And when I press export, we have the file and then it's ready to print. When I want to print this, I'm going to use Onyx Tough from Sprint Ray. It's a really nice material for these things. It's the bleach shade, but it's actually pretty nice for a wide range of shades with stain and glaze, and I'll show you that in a moment. So here's the patient prior to the day of her extraction, and trying to find the right shade. I got A and B, and I can kind of see it's in between, and it's got a little bit more chroma, but we're starting with this bleach Onyx Tough. Doesn't match at all, but look, with OptiGlaze color, using some A plus, B plus, a little bit of cervical pink orange shade, and even a little bit of translucency, we're able to get a pretty nice appearance here. And then I fix this onto that extraction model using sticky wax and make an Essex, give it to my periodontist, and it's ready for the day of surgery. And unfortunately, I didn't get a great photo of this afterwards because we quickly transitioned to the next appliance. She only had to wear this for 3 weeks. And in that time, I didn't see her. And by the time she came, she forgot to bring it with her. So I missed out on a good photo, but that bridged the gap from her extraction day to this stage. Okay. So everything you saw there in about 10 or 15 minutes of digital design. I delegate that to my staff. Let's go back for a second. So this is all delegated to my staff, except for the chair side stain and glaze, which I enjoy doing on easier shades or on less important teeth. You can just call it a day and give it a little coat of A or B. But since this was number 9, I wanted to try to make it as pleasing as possible for her. And I wanted to do it chair side while she was there so we can get a decent match. I also knew that I was going to be getting a Maryland bridge. So my first run with this is kind of like my test drive, and I wanted to know what I'm going to have to do for the next one. So now she presents back a few weeks later for post-op scan, and I've gotten the clearance from the periodontist to proceed to a fixed option, which was her goal to get into because she's a musician and that's very important to her. So now I'm going to do a roughly 3-minute video on the process of how you can use Medit Clinic CAD Beta to design this, okay? So I have tooth number 8 and 9 selected because number 8 is going to be my coping and number 9 is going to be my Pontic. So that's what I picked. And in this area, I'm going to say prepared data. and I'm going to let it automatically align things. And now what we have to do is select the area for our Maryland wing. So you don't have to be too precise initially. You can always adjust these points, but I like to have the opposing scan here so I know where I have some space to work with. You can always toggle the translucency or even remove the opposing so you can see better. And you'll pick your path of insertion here. But now I'm just kind of fine tuning these points. And I'm going to have to go towards the incisal because that's the only place I have space in this case. But that's going to work just fine. In the mesial embrasure, sometimes it's a good idea to extend around there so you get a thicker connector area. And that's something I typically do. And I'm setting my path of insertion here. So it gives me a tooth proposal, but I'm not even going to try placing it. What I do instead is I clone the neighboring tooth and mirrored it. So I use that mirror tool. I made this tooth, and now I'm placing a mirror of number 8 into position. And you can do a lot of different things with this to kind of position it well, including the free forming, which, you see the little dialogues in the top corner. But I want to get this positioned, and then I go ahead and move to the next step. And you see that it does a pretty good job here, but there's a little irregular contour on the distal area. So I'm going to go ahead and use my morph, or you can add to that area. One of my tips is to make sure you don't have too much overlap. You can always toggle translucency, but you don't want to have too much overlap. And you can always adjust your connector. So what I did there is I select the connector option, and you can make sure you have a nice connector. And so here we have the Maryland bridge at this stage. There is an option to send it straight to SprintRay for print, which is convenient. But before we do that, we're going to adjust the tissue contact. At this point, I've talked to my periodontist and we've decided that light tissue contact is okay for now. So we can do add, you can do the free forming or morphing here to move things around, and then remove as needed. So I'm just going to play around with this a little, adding and smoothing. And I'm going with green with a little bit of yellow to have a normal to moderate tissue contact. And when I press that SprintRay button, it links right to the Rayware cloud. And you're going to see that it's going to load this file right in. Oftentimes with the proposal for the supports ready for printing, really doesn't get much easier or faster than that. Just make sure you don't have any of your supports on the intaglio surface of the wing, because you don't want to have any issues with fit. So here we have our design and our 3D print. We got a pretty nice reproduction here. Again, 3D printed with SprintRay Onyx stuff. So now I am taking photos again, and I'm noticing I think B3 will be the best shade. Before I was kind of indecisive between A2 and B2, but I'm thinking B3. So what I do this time around, second time, to try to get a little bit of a more aesthetically pleasing result, is do a facial cutback. So I just cut back using a round burr, approximately 0.5 millimeter of the facial surface. So you see I marked the area, outlined it, cut it back using a diamond, and then I air braid the whole thing with 27 to 50 micron aluminum oxide. I'm going to glaze the intaglio surface because my goal is going to be to cement this and then characterize it in the mouth. So I want to make sure I glaze the intaglio before I deliver it, because I won't be able to reach it again. So I'm using OptiGlaze clear and curing. Now I'm going to go ahead for cementation here. Okay, so I'm etching the areas where I need the wing or the connector to be, and making sure you notice to go interproximal here, because I want this surface area for adhesion. So we got this frosty appearance of the enamel. The interproximal had an existing composite, so I sandblasted it ahead of time too. This is all going to be replaced in the next phase of treatment, so there's really no major concern. And to cement this Maryland bridge, I'm going to use what I use for a lot of my restorations, which is heated composite. It gives me unlimited working time. It's easy to work with, and it gives me good results. And so it's something that I think is less stressful than trying to use a dual cure cement. And it's something I'm very familiar with. To heat it up, I'm using the Calcet warmer from Adent, and the Calcet warmer heats the composite up and makes it more manageable. I've been using this thing since I was in dental school back in 2008. I was using one of these and I love it. On that note, if you're interested in purchasing it, you can contact Calcet, Adent, I should say. They have it on their website, but also because it's part of my courses and something that I highly recommend, you can buy it through my store, and they've given permission for that, which makes it the cheapest price. So I'm just passing on the savings. It's cheaper than anywhere else, but you definitely cannot do returns or anything like that because it's about 20% less than you're going to find it elsewhere. So that's my gift to anybody that wants a good price on it, but please no returns. It's part of the whole concept behind that store, which is reserved for my students, but you're all here. And I think that that qualifies, and they said that's fine. So here we have that Maryland bridge cemented. Okay. So obviously the shade is not tall, not acceptable, but we already know that, and we're going to be working on it. So as before, I'm going to use OptiGlaze, and I'm using the B. I use the pink orange. So this area is pink orange. B is over the whole surface. It's a little hard to see, but you see that area right there? I used a little bit of white to give it some of these white striations or crack lines that you see. And I used a little bit of translucency here, which is the lavender color that comes across there to give that. And remember, I cut this back. So I do all that, and then I want to cover this whole thing with Genial Universal Injectable AE. These are both from GC. I use OptiGlaze all the time, including on the Pontic, but Genial Universal Injectable. The AE is the aged enamel. It's good for kind of bringing the value down in this case, and it's going to seal in my stain and glaze. And I think it's going to give more depth to this kind of opaque restoration. So here you can see the result before final contour and polish, working on the contour and polish. And here's the immediate post-op. I think that's a pretty great result, but also I prefer to be a little on the lighter side because I can always add another coat of B onto the surface of the enamel if I need to modify. And that's a great way. We get the change in value from internal, and we can do an additional external amount. And in this case, I had talked to the patient. The Pontic for the Essex was a little bit darker, but she said totally fine. I asked her, would you rather have lighter or darker? And comes as no surprise. She said, I'd rather have lighter. And I checked up on her after delivering this. She said, it's perfect. These teeth are dehydrated right now, but she's very happy with this. And so this is a very predictable and very stable procedure. Using the Onyx Tough, it's very resistant to fracture. So this is what it looks like from the lingual surface. You can glaze or polish. Sometimes I do both of them. And of course, make sure that there's no occlusion. So here we have covered two different ways that Medit apps have transformed the way I practice. I used to really hate doing these cases because I had to communicate with getting a flipper from one lab, okay, or trying to make it myself. Then I had to deal with ordering a Maryland. And what happens when you have a Maryland bridge and now the patient gets their implant? Well, oftentimes you have to make a new one, and that's additional cost. Well, the beauty in this whole process is I can reprint that Maryland bridge. In fact, I usually print two of them right off the bat so that I have one more for later. And doing that chairside characterization takes me only about 15 or 20 minutes because I know what to do. And each time I get better and I take a few notes for that patient. So I can have it done ahead of time for her next one, or I could even give it to the surgeon for the day of implant placement to deliver. And so using this technology and having the flexibility and freedom to do these designs myself makes it easier on me and the patients. I typically quote a flat fee for the provisionals throughout treatment. And I include the removable and one or two different Marylands. If we need additional ones for other reasons, non-compliance, etc., I can just charge as we go. But it takes the pressure off. It makes this procedure so much more enjoyable. It even lowers the price and makes it something that is more, I guess, feasible and less stressful for everybody. So Medit apps have given me that ability. Also, since this will be on YouTube, I want to mention I do a lot of other videos and education for dentists and patients on my YouTube channel. So make sure you check it out. It's at Biomimetic Dentistry. And I got a bunch of different videos on biomedic and aesthetic dentistry and also some digital technology. So I hope you'll follow and subscribe to get all my latest updates. And aside from that, stay connected on social media. I hope you found this webinar useful and as exciting as I do, because this type of stuff has really changed the way I practice. And I hope it'll impact you the same way. If you're thinking it's too difficult, I can only tell you it's just a matter of practice. Once you master this, there's no looking back. Thank you so much for watching this webinar.
Okay, thank you for sharing all your tips with us, Dr. Nejad.
My pleasure. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Great.
So let's move on to Q&A session. So today we have 3 questions in total. So okay, let's start with the first question.
Great.
Question number 1. I'm curious about your workflow for restoring interim crown to patient on the same day.
Interim crowns for patient on the same day. Okay. So interims mean different things to different people, but for me, that's provisional. And I typically don't do, so for me, provisionals for single unit or maybe even a couple of units, I'm going to go ahead and still do it the traditional way. I might have a digital design done before the appointment, but I'll usually use a putty and bisacryl material because overall, I've gotten to the point where I can make a nice fitting provisional for most restorations, especially my partial biomimetic restorations where they don't have like they have to be shrink wrapped on. You know, you can't necessarily cement them in. They have to like wrap around the tooth. So because of that reason, using bisacryl and a high quality putty or a really good pre-op impression, I can make the provisional in maximum 5 minutes. Sometimes with a crown 5-6 minutes, with a inlay onlay something partial coverage, it's probably 3 or 4 minutes and adjust occlusion. That's it. So I usually don't want to 3D print those. But if you're doing quadrants or larger, I do like to do 3D printed, especially when I have a pre-op design or a preliminary design, so that I can be very true to that. I can also make sure that if we've opened the vertical or digitally planned the case, we can be true to that throughout the treatment. So in the last full mouth case I did, I had printed the provisionals for the case so that I could be very true to the design, make sure the occlusion was right on. So that's when I'm doing 3D printed, but otherwise I think the time benefit for 1 or 2 is still not there yet. You can also try doing the 3D printed shells before the appointment and reline them. That's also not a bad approach, but all in all, I don't find that necessary for 1 or 2 teeth, and I would reserve that for more like a quadrant of crowns or something like that.
It means for single crown, just you use the powder and liquid resin.
Well, powder and liquid was one way, and I did that for years. That would be with like PMMA, but I'm using the putty and bisacryl, which is the gun material that basically auto mixes. And there's a few of them out there. My favorite one is Visalis from Keatonbach because it is a very strong material. I never really have problems with it fracturing, so that minimizes post-op visits for problems with the temporary. So that's what I usually use for a lot of these cases.
Okay, thank you. Question number 2. Is there any clinical tip to have a perfect marginal fit when I want to do with model-less treatment? A
perfect marginal fit when you're doing model-less treatment. That's a good question. So I assume we're talking about 3D printing. So first of all, me personally, whether it's 3D printed or milled, I am a huge fan of having fail safes and backups and quality checks. So I will never do fully modelless, but what I have gotten comfortable with is not checking occlusion, but I want to check the contacts, the marginal fit, etc. And so I don't skip the model on most cases unless it's a one visit, same day case, in which case the patient's going to be my model and I'll check in their mouth. But for any case that's not done in the same day, I prefer to have the models. And I don't have any absolute tips for that because it all comes down to the quality of your scan and how much time you spend in the design and finishing. But you have to make sure you get calibrated with your proximal contacts and occlusion. Sometimes the software might say that you have a good contact, but I've noticed different things, like depending on what material I'm printing with, I might want to have a lighter contact or a heavier contact, depending on how much I'm going to glaze the restoration. Like if I'm going to do very minimal glazing and avoid glazing the interproximal areas, maybe I don't need to have, maybe I can have a little bit of a tighter contact. But if I'm going to be glazing the whole thing, I might want to leave a little bit of space so that I don't end up tight and having to adjust. So I guess what I would say is getting calibrated, and it's the same for everything, even if it's veneers for the interior, getting calibrated with your impression technique or your scan technique, the material and the technician or the technology. You know, when you're doing this stuff, you might be the technician and the technology and you're in charge of it. So you just have to get calibrated. And what we normally do is we write down if we notice that the occlusion was high or the contacts had a lot of adjustment, and I check it and I start kind of fine tuning in. So it's all based on the material and what you're going to do.
Mm. Okay, thank you for answering that.
Of
So
course.
we are left with the last question. So
Okay.
question number 3. How do you utilize Medit's clinic CAD in your clinic? Do you sometimes design simple processes by yourself?
So I'm using Medit Clinic CAD as I showed you for
Yeah.
Maryland bridges. For bridges, I have other cool cases where we've used 3D
Hmm.
printed 6 unit bridge. I've done a Maryland bridge with 4 pontics. I've done the Essex tray. Well, the Essex was with design, but that's soon going to end up being part of Medit Clinic CAD as it continues to grow and expand. I've
Mm.
done an inlay and a crown with it. And yes, I do the designing for these things. I'm
Mhm.
training one of my staff members, and she's growing very fast, and she's doing my splints and
Mhm.
my what else is she doing? Splints and models. But when it comes to designing this stuff, I feel like I need to master it before I delegate it. It's one of the things that's very important for me to grow and for the quality to stay the way I want. If I delegate it, I know I'm not going to be happy with the results and I'm not going to know how to fix it. So I do most of the design and I actually really enjoy it. And I think it helps me learn in very many ways. So that's how I'm using Medit Clinic Ed.
Wow. Okay, so it was all about today's quiz that are prepared for today.
Yes.
So you'll be able to watch this webinar on our YouTube channel and Medit Academy once it's completed. Thank you for being here, Doctor.
Thank you.
See you next time. Bye.
See you next time.